Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Can't Deposit Excuses podcast. I'm your host, Derek Wiley. Super excited today for my guest. We've got Frazier Hughes. You may have seen some of his posts on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. He's the Frazier Hughes Experience is what you may know him as. And yeah, Hughes it or lose it. So Frazier, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Derek. Good to see you today. Is this where the camera is?
I'm
right here. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So it's great to have you today. So glad that you could be on. So glad that you could be a part of the podcast and be here to talk with us. So
anytime I can get behind a microphone, I freaking love it.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, the real estate thing, obviously you're constantly out there on social media, doing your marketing, doing all your different things. So obviously people may have seen you there, but I know from having talked with you that this is not what you've been doing for the last 20 years. So why don't you give me a little bit of your backstory, like where you came from, what you were doing before this, and how you got into this? Because it sounds like it's a pretty interesting way around getting to the real estate game.
Yeah, I had to just introduce myself to a group here recently, and I told them that I think I've done twice as much in my lifetime as someone. Let me rephrase that. In my lifetime, I've probably done as much as probably 4 people would during their lives. And sometimes I ask myself, am I okay how it all ended up? Do I wish things would have happened sooner? And it's been a really wild ride. I feel like everything happens for a reason, and I'm exactly where I need to be at this moment. And I was born in Lynchburg and I was raised in Roanoke. So I grew up in Roanoke, except for my stint in Atlanta, Georgia, where I started my radio career on 96 Rock in Atlanta. I did classic rock. I think I can still do some radio breaks, but 96 Rock, 96.3 WROV. So I've done tons of commercials, TV commercials. I was the PA announcer for the Roanoke Dazzle, MC, lots of events. And, I did, just to tell everybody this, is that I got started in radio. I did not mean to get started in radio. I meant to get started like in film and TV. I wanted to because I was really funny and I had a really low self-esteem when I was a kid growing up. Even though I was really funny and people liked me, I just wanted to get famous so I would be loved, which is whoever's listening right now, an inside job. And I came to find out once that, because I did get a little bit of fame being on the radio in Atlanta. Like, people began to recognize who I was when I walked into stores. Like, they were like, you're that Frazier guy. What was cool is you were like Batman, because people heard the voice, but they didn't know what you looked like. Yes. So, like if I had to be on the news today, I would not enjoy walking into the supermarket and with my child and having everybody come up to me. Because I'm not a nice guy, just because I want to live my life. But that being said, I ended up on 7 different radio stations as an on-air personality, which is crazy. I ended up back in Roanoke, and never was my intention to come back to Roanoke. I wanted to get bigger and bigger, end up in like New York City. But I came back here to be closer to my parents, so I could be on the radio full time because I was on part time in Atlanta. And then so ended up back here in Roanoke, and the radio station I was on, I've never been fired from a radio station because I'm so amazing. But they'd be like, people will say, well, if you're still good, you would be on right now. Well, there's more to that. So, when I was on in Radford, I had a morning show. Well, Danielle Banks, if you watch the Weather Channel, she was on in the afternoons with me, and she's on the Weather Channel now. But just a quick snippet there. But they switched to sports talk, so I moved in with my parents in Roanoke. And I got severance for 2 months, and I was a big runner, and I just go run and sleep all day. And I ended up on 96.3 ROV here because I try to get on with them anyways, under a PD named Buzz Casey. And I tested so well in the Roanoke market because they would have these tests where they bring people into rooms and ask who is your most liked personality. And Dick and Dave were like number 1. I was number 2. And they were like, hey, we want to move you from ROV to WJJS to try to pump up their ratings. Yes. And be their sidekick, where I was the main guy. on ROV and did my own morning show. And when I was a sidekick, I didn't really like that because I like to have control of the show. I don't mind being your sidekick, but I was kind of like the gopher, go do little stunts and tricks on the street. And I think it's called your the street guy. There's another name for it.
Everybody has one of those, like the man on the street. We've seen that. It's a shtick, but it can be interesting and it's cool.
So I never intended on ever getting in sales. People would tell me like, "Hey, you should switch from radio to sales. You'll make a lot more money." And I was here in Roanoke, and I got divorced while I was on the radio. And at an early age, my father left and moved from Roanoke to Houston, Texas. So I promised myself I would never do that to my kids, even if I had to live in a cardboard box and not live my dreams and make 5 cents an hour. I was going to stay close to them so they could see my face and have some sort of presence in their life.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I have 4 kids with 4 different women. That wasn't the plan. But it does make life interesting, and it does make your real estate career worthwhile when you get the paycheck, because most of it does go to take care of your children.
Yes.
Hey, I did that. But anyways, radio led to what happened after radio. Radio, I went to an alarm company here in town, which was called ASI, because I really wanted to get out of the car business.
Yeah.
Which I went from radio. Here's what happened. Sorry, went from radio to cars because I thought when I was on the radio here, they moved me to WJJS, and then there was a new radio station coming on, so they moved me to that. Switched to country. I didn't want to be on country, so I went to the car business because I saw this ad in the paper. I was like, everybody's going to know that it was Frazier Hughes from the radio and come in and buy cars.
But why? Here's the question. Why? Obviously, everyone always told you, you ought to leave radio. You ought to go from radio to sales. But why car sales? Out of all the things that you could have sold, what was the drawing attraction to go into car sales out of everything that you could have done?
Yeah, true. Because, people do give you messages in life, and it could be like what we're talking about right now. And you sometimes you don't listen to them. Sometimes you think they're crazy, but I believe that you do get messages from other people, because it was an internet position, and I had just recently worked in a call center here for my friends. So it was like a call center type internet car sales, where you would just call people up and try to get them in to come look at the car.
Yeah, basically try to go through and use the personality, the phone presence, the voice, and all those things, and try to, because obviously you've got a skill, and that's the thing. I think a lot of times in life, people don't realize they have a skill, and they don't realize that they have it. But once you realize you have a skill, and your skill obviously is the ability to connect with people and to talk, and the ability to, do what you do now, but there's obviously many different ways to utilize that skill, right, and maybe to utilize it in a much more, in this case, financially prudent way, where it could be a lot more, benefit you a lot more if you could use that skill, maybe pay a little bit more, because you can write your own check. In radio, I would assume it's like any other job. The station pays you, but when you go into sales, you do have the ability to kind of have unlimited income earning potential.
Yeah, I mean, the only way to make extra money in radio is for appearances, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, because I feel like I'm kind of going back and forth. But I did leave radio to go into car sales, where I was not very good. There were some good managers at Berglund that I tried to pay attention to. Left Berglund. I've been with Berglund like 3 different times. Left them to go work for an alarm company. And the guy there, his name was Todd Booth, and he took really good care of me. And then I left there and went back into, where did I leave there from? I think I went back to Berglund again. Good Lord. But I ended up working for Dale Carnegie, because they had seen my social media, and he had thought, the owner of Dale Carnegie owns Virginia, West Virginia, and Atlanta franchises. And he'd seen my social media, and he thought, hey, if he can do this on social media, I can't imagine what he would be like with a group of people. And therefore, I ended up taking all the Dale Carnegie training.
I was going to say, you want to talk a little bit about, for those that are watching or listening that don't know who Dale Carnegie is or what Dale Carnegie training is about, share a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, sure. So most people that don't know about Dale Carnegie are typically under the age of 40, and it's really gone by them, which is kind of, or it wasn't part of their time. Kind of like my parents in their 70s, if you didn't get into the social media where you can, put your marketing out there and get into social media by a certain age, then you just don't get it. So I think people probably in their 60s up probably aren't that good at it, but also people that are younger are not familiar with Dale Carnegie. And if you look when he was alive, there was a lot of other prominent people alive during his lifetime that were making impact in our society, but he was quite I believe a failure. Like he worked really hard. And what I mean by failure is that he didn't really have much in his life, and he worked really hard to become a success. I'll take away the word failure. But he worked his way up, and he created this course on self-improvement, and it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he wrote the book. And I believe he was selling it during the Depression, and people were buying the shit out of it.
Do you think the part of the reason that you were drawn to that, and I'm going to go way back to something you said earlier, because you had a lot to your beginning story, but you mentioned that, when you were a kid, you had low self-esteem, but you were funny. And there's a common recurring theme, if you know anything about funny people or comedians, they tend to be kind of a tormented soul, in sense of the part of what makes them funny is that there's this wanting to be accepted. There's this wanting to be a sense of belonging. And so the humor can sometimes be there because it kind of covers up, like you said, that low self-esteem. It's a shield that you put up. And, if you use it the right way, then obviously you can build something and people think you're funny and all the rest, but there's always that piece underneath. And it's kind of like the motivation, because I think if you just thought that you were funny and you thought you were so great and you thought that the world loved you, that probably isn't going to make for somebody that's probably very personable, because then at that point, there's no humility there. At that point, that person has now become kind of just, a narcissist is what we would call that person. So do you think that there's like a correlation? Because it sounds like the Dale Carnegie stuff kind of spoke to that same part of your personality.
Yeah, I'd say I'm from one of my counselors, we were talking, because I believe in therapy, and I think you can't do things alone in your life, and you need to be able to have someone pick your brain and help you understand why you tick. And I was told I was a recovering narcissist, and I think that's how you become the narcissist, right? Because you're just dying to be loved. And so now I try to show the love. With Dale Carnegie, though, I felt like I was taken by the hand and shown like, hey, you can have a good time in life and be yourself. And you don't have to put on a front. You don't have to put on like, hey, what's going on this afternoon? Don't forget, I've got free tickets. I don't have to I can be Frazier Hughes and just be myself, because I'd seen a lot of CEOs and presidents of companies walk into a room, and we're talking some of the most successful people in this, in their business, and just act a fool and have fun and be themselves. And that's, I think, what life is about. I don't know if that answers your question, but for those of us that have a low self-esteem or have anxiety, we're always worrying about trying to be perfect or what people think of us. And it gave me permission to not, to make mistakes and not be perfect.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think a lot of times people are so wrapped up in the perceptions that others might have of them, what they might think of them, that it really is something that holds you back. There's something interesting that I was reading not too long ago. There's a movie with Jim Carrey that's, like the Yes Man. And this kind of goes along that theme. But the guy was essentially saying, imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and that everyone that you came into contact with couldn't say no. They could only say yes. Now think of how empowering that would be. And the reason that you're going to have empowerment in that is because say you've always wanted to meet, you're a realtor, and say you've always wanted to meet with a certain developer, or you've always wanted to meet with a certain client, and you want to represent their house. What would it feel like if you went to go talk to them and you said, I'd like to list your house, and they had to say yes? What would it feel like if you had to go talk to the biggest developer and you said, I want to represent this newest development, and they have to say yes? And the idea behind it is going and having conversations and living your life in a sense of freedom, because the reason that you won't go ask for that meeting, or the reason that you won't go ask that developer, or the reason that you won't go have that conversation almost every time is because you have a fear of rejection, or a fear of that you're going to be turned down, or they're going to say no. So if you can have that kind of that personality of, you know what, I'm just going to go into every conversation as if I'm going to get a yes, it will be freeing to you. So it's just kind of interesting the way that you phrased that.
I kind of like that, yeah, because there's a stack of business cards. I've got all kinds of people I can call. I've got hundreds of people in my database. So that's what I'll do is if I start slowing down, I just try to make phone calls. They suggest you time block your day from 9 to 11, you make the calls, but I'm getting calls from people. Sometimes I cannot do that. But there's a stack of people I'll get scared to call. Sometimes I'll be scared, be like, oh my God, they're just going to sense that I'm that goofy realtor. And then I have to reframe my thinking. It's not a goofy realtor. Now, some of my videos are goofy. And when it comes to business, taking care of you and your home, I'm like as serious as it gets. I'll say some funny things, but like I take it very personally, like taking care of the client. It always was that way when I sold cars as well. But, you go back to the Jim Carrey thing and those entertainers, I think I have some similar characteristics of David Letterman, Jim Carrey, Robin Williams. Most of those guys are struggling at some point with, depression or feeling upset with themselves. And
yeah, that's the coping mechanism. Like, so that's, some people may turn to alcohol, they may turn to drugs, they may turn to different things, but some people, their thing is adoration. So they turn to that and they try to feel like, well, how can I, get that sense of euphoria, that sense that you get? Because if you've ever been on stage or been in a production or been on the radio, that sense that you feel like, when you are, some people don't like that feeling, they shy away from that. But if you've caught that bug, and you obviously at a point in your life caught it, and still to this day, you utilize that skill set, but it can really work wonders for you. And now for those guys, it took them to the heights of the high. But
well, one thing is when it comes to that is that it works for a little while.
Yeah.
And so then I have to give myself a sense of accomplishment for like when I go to shoot my videos for Facebook, like Facebook stories, I'll go and look back at, I put music to usually all of it because I love music. I was on the radio. I will put music to it and I'll go back and be like, man, that looks so cool. I'll be like, man, that's awesome. I'll be like, I hope someone likes it. And I'm not usually thinking, man, I look cool, like the egotistical side of it. Now there's a difference. I do have confidence. I believe in myself. So there's no other realtor that does what I do. Like no one pumps out the videos and goes in and talks about the houses. And I was like, this is like a freaking TV show if you follow me.
I'm going to ask you this because I do follow you and you know this because I've obviously commented on a bunch of the things that you are talking about. You're like, oh, you saw that post or you saw this? Absolutely, I saw it. I think you just hit on something though that I don't want to let slip by. You said confidence. Yeah. I have confidence. So this is something that I see that I think is really important.
And here's one thing too, and sorry to interrupt you, but when I went to Dale Carnegie, the confidence was the confidence to be myself because I was so worried, like I've got it, what people would think about me. I was like, oh, that's okay. Oh, I can say something goofy. Hey, yeah, I did leave you 2 scoops of ice cream on my desk. They're there with your extra set of keys. Well, they're going to be melted by the time we get there, Frazier. And they joke with me. I know I've got an even better client.
Well, here's the thing. Well, you just said it. The confidence piece, it's like you're worried about what people are going to think. But I think just the fact that you have got to have a certain level, and even if you don't have it, you've got to realize in order to be successful, you have to have some type of inner confidence in yourself and in your ability. You've got to have that because I think you said it earlier. Sometimes you pick up the phone and you got to make this phone call. And the only thing that you're thinking about in your head is, oh man, I'm going to be viewed as this goofy realtor making this phone call.
Or I don't have the education they have.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I've got, it's all self-talk. We talked about it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And when I did my first radio break in Atlanta on 96 Rock, it was midnight because they weren't going to put me on prime time because I was just learning. So they put me on from midnight to 8 a.m. And my mentor was Steve Rickman, Southside Steve. He's still on in Atlanta. And he said, hey, I just want to let you know at any given time, 100,000 people are going to be listening. And I got on my knees and said a prayer. I was like, I'm not sure who God is, but I need some freaking help. And so he also said to me, it's also okay for you to be a little cocky. Yeah. I was like, really? I was like, so I can give my self permission to be cocky? I was like, what does that mean? All right, so I was like, all right, I'm coming on. And then it just took practice.
I want to stop you there though, because Frazier, I want to make sure for the kids that are watching, they might not know that word. Today they call that swag. Yeah. So you have to have. It's okay to have a little bit of swag in your.
When I think of swag, I think of like you give me gifts.
Yeah, see,
Swag bag.
That's the lingo changes.
And I did cuss earlier. I did use the S words. I apologize to all the kids out there, but I'm sure it is a word that you have heard before
They
from
may
one
have.
of your parents.
They may have. But no, swag. Like I said, that sense of like you've got to have a little bit of that edge to you because if you don't, people sense that.
Dale Carnegie says, smile. So when you got to the grocery store, instead of shopping like this, okay, it's just like force the smile like this, and people will gravitate towards you. So if both of you guys, I know there's someone filming us right now, but if both of you all smile when I walk in, I feel a lot more comfortable when I'm around you too. All right, welcome to our jail cell. Or like we're too cool for the room, even though that's not what you are. But I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, how am I going to read this guy? And or if you're at a party, if you're just kind of like this, hanging out, people would be like, man, that guy seems like he's having fun, or they're going to be anxious because their self-esteem is low because they're like, he's having a good time. I'm really not, because I'm really, really worried about everybody thinks.
But it's not a physical thing either, because I think the thing that you have to remember is that smile, like forcing yourself to, it also changes your personality.
Yeah. I'm having a good time right
exactly. now. Exactly. It forces you to be in that position. We talk about positivity and the power of positivity. And sometimes people hear that, and if they haven't ever tried to practice it, they may think, oh, well, that's just talk. There's not anything to it. And the reality is, if you are that way, even if you're not feeling positive, if you can force yourself into that mood, or you can force yourself to maybe, put a smile on when you don't feel like having one, it's kind of amazing that in a short period of time, mentally a switch will flip, and the next thing you know, you're kind of starting to feel the way that your outward appearance is showing. I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I agree. And affirmations, I think, were kind of goofy. If you ever saw the old Michael Jordan skit on Saturday Night Live, you should Google it. He gets in front of a mirror with Stuart Smiley, and Stuart says, all right, now, Michael, go out there. And Michael's like, and I'm good enough. And darn, he starts laughing. But, the thing to take into consideration here is that when I got here, I was really tired, but I was like, one, I'm getting filmed, okay, which is a lot different than hearing me. So I'm gonna smile because I want your business. So I don't want you to think I'm just kind of like this, even though I'm tired. And I was like, I'm gonna have a good time with this guy. I was like, I do not know this insurance agent very well, but I'm gonna have a good time with him. He invited me out here, so it's time to turn it on. So it's the same as if you're making a phone call to your client. Now, one other thing is that I firmly believe in affirmations. And for a while, I did think they were goofy, but I've got one that I wrote that I put together on my phone. And it says right here, believe in new possibilities from the people you meet, the actions you take, the people you help, and look for your helpers. So Mr. Rogers had a quote. He told his mom one day, he's like, I'm really scared. And she's like, hey, well, look for your helpers. That's not the exact quote, but there's people out here willing to help us all over. It could be your neighbors. It could be you. Hey, me coming here today, meeting you, I could help you, vice versa. You're a photographer right here. I could suggest him to somebody else. So if I had said, no, I didn't want to come out here today, and I almost did because I was really busy, really overwhelmed, and but I said, this is what I time block to do. I enjoy it. And so the consequences are something better instead of negative.
Butterfly effect, that thing exists. People don't think it's true, but you never know the connection, the person that you meet today or that you pass by, how they can impact you in the future. And I think that's also important in how you treat other people. And I haven't always been, a practitioner of that. And I'm sure all of us have had times in our lives where I wasn't great that day or with that person or in that moment. But you realize that you never know how you treat someone today or how you interact with someone, or just willing to be open to the possibility of, coming on and being part of a podcast or coming on or going on someone else's, going to lunch, whatever it might be, what the long-term consequences of that may be. It may not be that person in that moment, but good things can come from that if you're open to it. And I love what you said about affirmations, because I think a lot of people hear that and it sounds like just flowery talk, and it doesn't really have any bearing.
And I'll give you a good example of this, because this is stuff that you don't always hear people share. You'll just hear people say, stay positive. But I had a really big listing for me. I was in our market. It was an area that gets dominated by a certain realtor. And I ended up getting the listing. And these were people that were close to me. And they were going to go with that realtor, but they decided to go with me. and this other realtor is really good. I compliment them, and so I was really worried about screwing up. I was like, and there was nothing to screw up. I'd done everything right, but I hadn't slept well, so I was beginning to like feel really a lot of anxiety. So I stopped myself in the stairwell at work, and I was like, I just stopped and I got quiet, and I was like, okay, everything's gonna be all right. I'm doing fine. This is all going to work out. And I think the big problem with us in our society is that, one, we don't do that, and we don't have anybody else to talk to, and we're inside of our head and we don't stop, and we're like, oh God, I don't know if it's going to work out. I mean, we'd go on the whole day like that. But I was like, hold on a second. I was like, I've got to take control of this. Now, did it go away 100%? No. But if I can continue to do something like that in my life and practice talking like that, hey, this podcast is going to go great. This podcast is going to, hundreds of people are going to be affected by this in a positive way.
Well, the alternative is letting it spiral. Because you just said, like, it's in my head. And the alternative is I just spiral into this thing where I never can get where I need to be because I've just let it spiral the entire way. And then you can't do that. And that's where you've got to, in between your ears, you've got to have that conversation with yourself sometimes and say, okay, I've got to get away from that. It's still going to be there. It's the butterflies, right? It's the butterflies. And the butterflies are a good thing if you use them. But if you let them take over, they can be a problem.
You can, and you'll hear me refer to Dale Carnegie. He's got this golden book. If anybody ever wants it, you can look up Frazier Hughes on Google. It explodes, and I'll send it to you. What I said is like I'm easy to find. I'll send you Dale Carnegie's golden book. But one of the things he has like his principles to live by in there. He says, what's the worst that can happen? So what's the worst that can happen with my client? Well, I guess I could get sued. They could say Frazier Hughes isn't that good. And I was like, oh God, well, don't anybody say I'm not that good because I'm really trying to be good, but is that going to happen? 99% of our fears don't come true.
Yeah. Well, that's what you said. I mean, that whole thing of being so worried and so concerned about what others think or how we may be perceived is probably, quite honestly, the biggest roadblock to a lot of people maybe succeeding or living the life they want to lead is because they allow themselves to basically, to use an analogy to a bowling alley, they allow these rails to be put up on either side. And now they're like, well, I've got to do this because I don't want to risk, going off into the gutter on either side and, throwing a gutter ball. Well, the reality is, you know what? Your personality is great, but you know what? I'm sure just like I'm not everyone's cup of tea, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And that's okay. Yeah. But I can't let the fear of me not being accepted by everyone make me basically put a shell around myself and not be open to talking to other people or not be open to being around and with and experiencing good, positive things with people, because that's even worse. Worse than the rejection is, like you said, not being your genuine self, not going out there and being who you are. And I know we've been talking, I've enjoyed the conversation, but I want to say, because we're kind of running a little bit low on time, the name of this podcast is Can't Deposit Excuses. And you've had so many good, positive things to say that I think a lot of people can take from this episode, things that they can look into, like Dale Carnegie. I normally ask, is there a person, a book, something that motivates you? Obviously, I think you'd say that's something that if people don't know and aren't familiar with that, they should look into. But what is the phrase "can't deposit excuses"? When you hear that, what does it mean to you? What does it make you think of when you hear that?
Can't deposit excuses. Well, I think about deposits. I think about money, really. And then I think about spirituality. Those are two things in my life, but I think the spirituality is the most important part of it. There's a lot of growing for all of us to do, Yes. And I don't think it happens in this lifetime, whatever your religious belief is, but I don't think it's all going to happen while you're on planet Earth. Can't deposit excuses. Well, I failed the real estate exam 5 times, and people will say, hey, don't put that out there. Don't let anybody know that you failed. Well, I'm not a good test taker, but I'm a hell of a salesperson. Yeah. And, and I failed it, and I walked out of there crying. I mean, tears in my eyes. I was having flashbacks to private school, failing over and over, failed it again, went to Berglund, was salesman of the year. People kept telling me, the owner of Dale Carnegie was like, man, you'd be a really good real estate agent. People would be like, man, you would really be a great real estate agent. I was like, Frazier, don't give up. I get up every morning. I was like, okay, I'm not going to make any excuses. All right, I'm going to get up every morning, 4 a.m. I will record the tests. Like you have answers to your tests when you're studying for the license. on my phone on my voice recorder, and I go for 5-8 mile walks, and I'd be like, I want to listen to music. I was like, no excuses. Listen to yourself. So I'm listening to myself talk to me, educating me on real estate. Failed it again. Went back. I said, okay, what else can I do? No more excuses. Okay. Meet with the teacher. Teacher said I can meet with him. Okay. Then I passed Virginia. Go back. Failed national. And then all of a sudden, I was like, all right, keep studying. Get up at 4 a.m. Get up at all night. Whatever I had to do. And then all of a sudden, I passed it. And I was like, okay, I passed it. I was like, all right, now what's next? But there was no excuses. It was like, how bad do I really want it? I mean, with a guy with a learning disability that, was scared to go to college.
Yeah, you were relentless. You had a relentless pursuit because once you had that in your head that that's what you wanted to do, you weren't willing to let anything else stop you. So that should be a testament to anybody out there that maybe has failed at something or struggled at something or has had a challenge, whether it be a learning disability, whether it be a test that they're not a good test taker, whatever that might be. You've got to just, unfortunately, deal with the fact that that's the reality, but it doesn't have to be the reality permanently. You can keep striving and pushing and trying to make that positive thing happen, and don't be dissuaded by some setbacks.
I was having PTSD from school,
Yeah.
And so I had to just say Hughes it because I didn't want to lose it.
Yeah, there you go.
But seriously, I was having that anxiety, and so I just kept, like you said.
Yeah, I think I posted something on social media not too long ago, and it was essentially like, sometimes the comeback is bigger than the setback. And so that's what you have to realize. And so you obviously came back and passed it, and that's great.
And one other thing, sometimes I've heard some people say this, it's not the destination, but the journey that makes us stronger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, before I let you go, Frazier, I know for those who do not know who you are, which if you're not on Facebook, you don't follow this guy on LinkedIn or Facebook or his social media, I encourage you to do so. He's got some very interesting posts. He'll teach you about real estate. He's got a podcast of his own where he talks about, I think the last one I listened to, I think, was about home inspections.
Mm-hmm. And then I wrote about it in the Valley Business.
Valley Business Front. So, where can people find you? Where can they follow you? Give us a little bit of
You're too good to me. Well, I don't have any billboards right now, and I'm okay with that. But you can go to Facebook and type in the Frazier Hughes Experience. And if you're not on Facebook, which there's only 1 out of 1 million that aren't on there, you can go to LinkedIn and just type in Frazier Hughes. My real name on Facebook is Russell Frazier Hughes Jr. For my dad. And then I'm Hughes or Lose on Instagram. But if you type in Frazier Hughes on Google and my name is with a Z, you'll find me wherever you want to find me.
Yes.
YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. The first page is completely me. And I would love to hear from you. And even if it doesn't have to do with selling your home or finding your home, if you need some help or guidance, just hook up with me.
Well, guys, thanks again for another episode of Can't Deposit Excuses, and we'll see you on the next one.